Uhlmann reporting for KD Chats here at the Tiff Bell Lightbox in downtown Toronto with Senior Programmer at the festival, Steve Gravestock. What are you most looking forward to for this year's festival?
Well, probably September the 16th, when I can see my son and wife again. But yeah, there's tons of stuff this year. We had quite a few world premieres, so it's going to be a very exciting festival. We have a lot of returning filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers who have made, I think, serious steps forward as they're displaying a different level of maturity. Terry Miles, for example, a BC-based filmmaker, has a new film called Cinema Novels that stars Lauren Lee Smith, Jennifer Beals, and Ben Cotton. Lauren Lee Smith plays a young woman who is dealing with her father's death, and they were estranged. They hadn't spoken in quite some time, and for various reasons she gets roped into work. He was a filmmaker, and she gets roped into working on a retrospective of his work, and so she starts to discover things about her father. She starts to sort of ape his behavior. She meets with his ex, the lover who sort of destroyed the marriage, played by Gabrielle Rose. Really kind of a slow, sort of sultry, kind of a slow burn. Lauren Lee Smith's in the film throughout, and she's really kind of hypnotic. She's finding stuff about herself as well. So it's a great, really, I think, one of the best performances I saw all year. And the film has this sort of great look, and there are these sort of great parodies of filmmakers' style running throughout, because all the father's films all deal with tormented breakups. So it's a very sort of slyly funny movie, and really great acting, and really nice to see. I mean, I think this is the third film we've shown of Terry's, and there's a real progression there. His first film was When Things Were Good, and then we showed Night for Dying Taggers, which had a slightly bigger cast, or a slightly better known cast. He's always had some really interesting actors he's worked with, so it's nice to see that kind of progression. Same with Siddharth. We have the North American premiere of that, the new film by Richie Maida. He made Amal a couple years ago, which was on our Canada's Top 10 Features list. This film is shot in India. It sort of develops that sort of neo-realist, realist aesthetic he worked on in Amal. It's about a father searching for his lost son, and is really quite touching, really beautifully put together. Quite an intense drama in a lot of ways, and sort of forlorn. It's a really smart movie. It shows a real progression in terms of and kind of open-ended too, which I think is really interesting. A lot of Richie's stuff has been very heavily plotted, and this is a bit more. It seems to be sort of flow in a different kind of way, sort of like Bicycle Thieves or films like that. Got a lot of, I think this year's been quite interesting for the amount of First Nations content. We have 3 films like that. Peter Stebbing's new film, which is produced by Jennifer Podemsky and written by a Cree screenwriter, Shannon Masters. Also stars Cara G, who's one of our rising stars at TIFF this year, about films called Empire of Dirt, about 3 generations of First Nations women. Cara G plays the middle daughter. Jennifer plays the grandmother. It's a really smart movie about the different conflicts between generations. Cara's character has left her family home quite some time ago, and ran into trouble, and she sort of found a more stable footing, and now she sees her daughter running into the same sort of situations, so she kind of flees back to her mother's house, and it's about how she deals with it, and it's all complicated by the appearance of an ex-boyfriend played by Luke Kirby, who's always trouble. And great performance by Luke, though. Really strong cast. First feature by Jeff Barnaby, who also was a top 10 filmmaker with his short The Colony a couple years ago. People who know Jeff's work, he's one of the most unique young filmmakers working in Canada today. Great stylist, really distinct visual look, pretty intense narratives. This film, Rise for Young Ghouls, is kind of like S.E. Hinton on Hash. It's really kind of a unique kind of chiaroscuro visual, lots of shadows, visual landscape or scheme. It's about a young woman, and she's sort of she's lost her mother, and her father's been incarcerated, and she's sort of left to her own devices, or left to her uncle's devices, and she winds up sort of running the drug business on the reserve where she lives, and it's got this sort of amazing poetic narration. It really kind of picks up in some ways on the kind of myth making or the mythic type filmmaking that's coming out of Asuma Productions, that Zacharias Canuck did with Anton Arjuad, or Journals of Nude Rasmussen, or the film that won the best Canadian first feature here a couple years ago, Before Tomorrow. Really, really smart, edgy filmmaking. He's really a talent to watch, I think, and some great performances throughout. Mark Krupa plays the evil sort of Indian agent who's like kind of messing things up for people. He's quite villainous. I think we last had a film with him, Wild Hunt, which won the best Canadian first feature here a couple years ago. The film is set against the backdrop of the residential schools tragedy, and we had revelations about that again this week. Really, really intense drama. And also I think because it sort of plays with genre a little, I think it's a good way to get that kind of message out and deal with that kind of subject matter. I think it might get to more people, and I mean, it still deals with it in an intelligent way and a very smart way, a very emotional way, but I think it's also interesting to see it in that kind of context. The other one is, of course, by I think a Canadian master, Alaniso Bumsawan. Her new film, Hi Ho Mista Hay, deals with a young woman named Shannon who is agitating for better schools in far north communities, or communities in the far north, and how about her community kind of backs her. It's a really, I think, one of the most emotionally powerful movies people will see this year. Just beautifully done. I mean, Alanis is a major filmmaker, and we're really proud to show the world premiere of that film. Also this year, lots of films by women, which is cool. Ingrid Veninger has a new movie, Animal Project, which is very cool. Also kind of riffs off one of her first shorts from a while back. I think that was actually the first time I met Ingrid on that one. Stars Jacob Switzer, Aaron Poole, and a great ensemble cast.
And they're all in furry animal costumes?
Yes, yes, that's it exactly. It's riffing off the Bunny Project, which stars Ingrid's son, Jacob. And it's about, it's kind of indicative of what went on with a lot of films this year. There's a lot of films about family relationships and kind of about delinquent parents, delinquent children, families sort of splitting apart or running through difficulties. Each family is kind of unique in its own way. I mean, it's quite interesting to see. I mean, one of the to mention another woman filmmaker, Catherine Martin, who we've shown I think all of her feature-length work, beginning with Mariage, which I think is one of the best feature debuts to come out of Canada in the last 20 or 30 years. And the new film, Une Jeune Fille, or Journey in English, is about a young girl, and her mother passes away, and she's left with her father, who sort of sees her as a burden or as a way to make money. So she sort of flees to the countryside, to Gaspé, where her mother grew up, and her mother always sort of viewed that time of her life fondly and always wanted to return there. So she kind of makes the journey for her mother, and she kind of winds up, she's on her own. She doesn't have much money. You can feel, she wanders around hungry for a couple of days, and you can, like, the film's so tactile, you can feel the hunger pangs, and, like, you know, when she's eating, like, what's the last meal she can pay for. And then it's a great performance, too, by the young actress. Really, really strong. And beautifully photographed. I mean, it's a really striking region. And anyway, I mean, she meets a young farmer who's struggling with his own issues. He's trying to hang on to the family farm, even though his sister wants him to sell. Which is a theme, again, also explored in Sebastian Pilotz's Le Démantèlement, which is an equally powerful and affecting movie. But I mean, to me, the Catherine Martin movie is really, it might be her finest work, finest fiction work in some ways. It kind of riffs off of the great Mouchette by the great French filmmaker Robert Bresson. I think a really, really strong movie. If you haven't seen a Catherine Martin movie, this might be the one to see. I'd recommend all of her work, but this might be a good intro. New film by Wiebke von Karlsfeld, whose first film, Marion Bridge, won, I believe, the Best Canadian First Feature a couple years back. Stay stars Aidan Quinn, is a writer who's kind of a recluse in this sort of rural Irish countryside, or in the Irish countryside, and he's kind of forced back into dealing with people for a variety of reasons. Also, again, about dealing with family. Michael Ironside plays his prospective father-in-law, and very kind of complicated family histories. There's lots of riffs about the sort of split between rural areas and urban areas. The new film by Xavier Dolan, Tom at the Farm, is of course, Xavier Dolan's one of our finest filmmakers. Young, even now he's a veteran. I mean, this is his last film, Lawrence Anyways, won the Best Canadian Feature here last year, and he made Je tue ma mère, I Killed My Mother, Les Amours Imaginaires. Great sort of all his films kind of riff off of desire and the ramifications and complications of desire. This film is a bit more sinister. It's more of a thriller, and Dolan plays a guy who is going back to rural Quebec to bury his lover, his boyfriend, and it turns out that the family is a little more complicated, and it's a much darker history than he knew about. It's kind of riffs off those old kind of thriller things where people go and visit the family, and it turns out the family is much more complicated and nastier than you think. Really smart movie, great performance by Dolan and the whole cast. Evelyn Brochu, who plays his sort of confidant, the woman he turns to when he's trying to escape. He's basically sort of kept there. Is a rising star as well, so that's kind of cool. She gives a memorable performance in really like in a very brief sort of turn, but quite strong. Some great docs. Watermark, Prutinsky and Beischwal worked together on Manufacturer's Landscapes, which I think is one of the best documentaries we've produced in the last 25 years. This film's on a par with that. It's about our relationship with water. I mean, as you'd expect from a visual artist of like Bertinsky's stature and unique eye. There's some pretty striking imagery, especially when there's a lot of stuff about dams and you see water pounding through. It looks like a Turner painting. It's quite intense. New film by Jody Shapiro, who did How to Start Your Own Country from a couple years ago. Bert's Buzz, which is about the iconic, about Bert, who's the iconic figure who was behind Burt's Bees and the lip balm and all that, and his sort of life as kind of a celebrity spokesperson. It's quite charming, quite intriguing. He's a very unique kind of guy, and has lived a rather distinctive life. New film by Alan Zweig, When Jews Were Funny, about Alan's it's very much about Alan's relationship with Judaism and Jewish culture, because he's sort of trying to assess his relationship with the culture because he doesn't observe in a traditional way, and his first identification as a Jew was like seeing Jewish comics on TV in the 50s and 60s, and he kind of explores that and whether there was something specifically Jewish about the comedy. There's some great, classic, amazing comics in the movie that he interviews, like Shelley Berman, Shecky Green, David Brenner, David Steinberg, Super Dave Osborne. There's a great sort of interplay with him, because Super Dave Osborne is kind of like really cranky, and like Alan kind of plays a reluctant straight man in it. Great footage too, some great archival footage. One of my favorites, Jackie Mason, does a classic bit in it, but it's sort of like a kind of casual history of Jewish comedy, but also very much about how you deal with your parents' culture, how you find forays into it, how you link up to it, how you connect with it. In some ways, it's very sort of thematic with it. It's sort of simpatico with a lot of the other films. Really cool. Filthy Gorgeous, the new film by Barry Average about Bob Guccione, who founded Penthouse, is kind of Barry unearthed a totally alternate history of him. People didn't know that he was actually a very serious painter and spent many years trying to make a living, and the publication stuff was actually kind of an anomaly. He only did it to make money initially, and then he became like he was incredibly wealthy, and he was almost like looking at Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson. He spent thousands and thousands of dollars on purchasing art, and had a massive art collection, quite an extraordinary art collection actually. And also a kind of a Horatio Alger store, because he became very wealthy and when he kind of overextended. Really interesting take. And he was also kind of a radical or revolutionary in a way, because he did sort of, the way he ran that magazine was quite different, and he gave women jobs that other magazines, they couldn't get in the publishing industry at the time. Like, they were running the marketing and the advertising departments, which was unique in the late 60s and early 70s.
And there's also a lot of returning filmmakers this year.
Yeah, there's new films by Bruce McDonald, Bruce Sweeney, Mike Dowse, Bruce LaBruce, and in a lot of cases it's kind of they're exploring different territories or different sort of terrain. Bruce's film, The Husband, written and starring Maxwell McCabe Locus, great performance, by the way, one of the best performances of the year, I think. That deals with sort of impotent male rage, and the main character is raising a son by himself, and his wife has actually been imprisoned because she was a teacher and she slept with a student who was underage, and it's like he's furious about the whole thing and can't really deal with it. And it's like, it's kind of sort of darkly funny, but also very empathetic, and it's very much a movie about how much sympathy you feel for someone when they start to misbehave, and the limits of sympathy, and like a really subtle direction. I think Bruce did a sensational job. Bruce LaBruce's movie, he's done some fairly radical and pretty intense stuff. This movie, Gerontophilia, is about a young guy who finds that he's really into older men, and it's really quite tender and very romantic, and kind of like a lot of charm to it too, and really cool performances. Katie Bolan, who was a rising star at Tiff a couple years ago, does a great turn as this sort of like uber radical ex-girlfriend of the hero. Bruce Sweeney's back. I'm just doing the Bruces now.
Yeah.
Bruce Sweeney's back with a new film called The Dick Nosh Show that stars Tom Schulte, and almost an unrecognizable, you can't actually recognize him. He looks completely different than you'd expect, as this sort of bearded, really uber gruff sports radio talk show host, and he's like totally obsessed with hockey, doesn't care, makes fun of soccer or football all the time. And poo-poos concussions and thinks it's like people being overly sensitive, and then he has a concussion and everything sort of falls apart for him. It's got a great cast. Schulte's amazing as this sort of crusty dude, and his second in command is, his second banana, Schulte's second banana is Paul Scrudlin, who people remember from Excited, or excuse me, Sweeney's last film, Crimes of Mike Reckitt. Scrudlin's a great comic talent. He's like done these off-the-cuff improvisation things. He's the second banana. Even when he's on the show, he's always downloading like racy pictures of Polina Gretzky, and he's like totally obsessed. Gabrielle Rose plays the producer, who's like really, it's almost like she's always pushing, keeping the show afloat. She's kind of reminds me of Rosalind Russell and His Girl Friday. She's very sexy in it. Bullies the station manager to keeping the show on the air. It's very funny. And Mike Dowse has a new film, romantic comedy called The F Word, which I quite adored. Stars Daniel Radcliffe and Zoe Kazan as two people who start out as friends, and it's about how their relationship sort of develops. Really quite charming. Great script by Alain Mastine. Great, like the sort of minor characters, the characters besides the other characters in the film besides the lead couple do a great job. Megan Park is great as Zoe Kazan's sister. Just a really extraordinary cast, and I think one of the most charming Canadian films I've seen in a while.
And where's the best place for us to find out more information on you and on all of the wonderful films at TIFF online?
Well, I'd go to tiff.net. I go to the films first. You can look me up later. That'll probably stay up for a while. So.
Thanks so much, Steve. Congratulations on your many years here at TIFF, and have a wonderful festival.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Katie Uhlmann reporting for Katie Chats at the TIFF Bell Lightbox in downtown Toronto.